Hi, I'm Shan Wu with a undercolor of law hot take on, for lack of a better word, ageism. So the controversy over President Joe Biden that arose from the debate is a somewhat puzzling one to me and ultimately a little bit infuriating. So let's talk about the law for a moment. We have laws against discrimination. Why? Like you can't discriminate against someone on the basis of their sexual orientation, their color, ethnicity, and there's also laws against discriminating against someone for their age. That's the ageism part. So why do we have that? Well, it's the right thing to do. We shouldn't discriminate, right? That's a bad thing. But what's the real reason why we have to have laws about that? Well, we have laws against that to guard against a dark side of human nature, which is people will be cruel. People will look to bully. They'll look to take advantage of weakness. And that arises because people look around and say, oh, someone looks different from me. They act differently from me. They speak differently than me. Now, you see this a lot with kids, right? Schoolyard bullying. When I was a kid, I was bullied a lot for being Chinese, made fun of me. As I got older, I realized that's sort of part of a childhood tendency to make fun of someone who looks different from you. Still racism, but much more excusable when it's children, because children are actually trying to learn about their world by differentiating. Something looks different, so they notice that. And because they're kids, they don't have a bigger moral sense. They don't have a picture of how differences are what makes people stronger, what teaches them differently. So they make fun of it. So getting back to Joe Biden, particularly in the Western culture, I mean, it's true in Eastern cultures too, but there is just this default mode of being obsessed with youthfulness and hating the old, really hating the old. There's nothing that's more automatically funny to Western people than making fun of old people. But that's just a natural state. And so Biden, at his age, obviously in quite good physical condition for his age, I've seen him speak publicly in person, very sharp. People say he's mentally sharp. Is he as sharp as he was when he was a younger man? Of course not. Does he move slower? Of course he does. But let's take a look at what's been happening in the country since he had this debate. So he didn't have a good debate, at least not the opening few minutes of it. I mean, frankly, later it seemed perfectly fine, and Trump remained quite consistently really bad and kind of went downhill. What happened during that debate? Well, he had opening 10 minutes. He looked kind of off. He looked tired. Some of it was just a logistical thing, which is for some reason he was looking down at his notes. He was looking off to the side like that. And that, to some extent, is bad preparation. I mean, a guy like that doesn't need that much debate preparation because he's been doing it for years. They can stuff his head with facts and he can put them together in answers. But something that was lacking was making him clear about what you do with the camera. So I'm looking at you through a camera. If I start looking off to the side, it's going to look very odd, even though I might be looking at something important on the side. So that was bad. He wasn't sharp enough for that 10 minutes, and he wasn't able to really come back at Trump really sharply. Okay, let's look at what's happened since then. The whole country, mostly Democrats, seems to have erupted with this idea of, is he fit for office? We have to switch candidates right now. And what is that all about? It's like you'll hear on the media people saying, oh, this is, what people have been saying. We're saying the quiet part out loud. What is the quiet part? That he's 81? I mean, what, that changed? Nobody knew that before? It's really quite frightening to look at the way that the media has gone into kind of a feeding frenzy on this point, completely dropping the balls on the side of the sheer amount of lies that Trump was telling during the debate and continues to tell every day, completely dropping the ball on all the laws that his supporters say they want to enact, how they want to change the laws to make it more of a dictatorship. All that's sort of lost over this constant frenzy of, is he going to drop out? Is he going to drop out? In fact, you can see some really ugly things that have arisen from that, really ugly. Like, we'll put up this particular point by a well-known media commentator. Don't know the full context for it, but he put it up there. And he's basically making fun of the fact that Biden signed some legislation or a proclamation about Parkinson's disease. And he's saying, oh, of all days, you know. And, you know, one of the really big voices on Twitter, JoJo from Jers, really comes at him pretty hard for that. Yeah, and she should. Okay, because where is that going? You know, I started with ageism, right? Now, of course, he's kind of making fun of people with a particular disease, Parkinson's disease. Let me tell you something about Parkinson's disease. Okay, I worked for the longest serving attorney general in history, Janet Reno, who had Parkinson's disease. And believe me, it got worse during her tenure. And did it affect her? Hell yeah. She had trouble holding things. She shook. The voice would shake. It was weak. But she was sharp as a tack and she did her job. And that's exactly what you want to look at, is what kind of job has this president done, the kind of job he continues to do, rather than seizing on this frenzy in the media of, let's talk about something we think is really interesting. It's like a scandal. We can finally talk about politics again like we used to talk about it before we had this problem with Trump. It's a great disservice to do this, but you know, it's the media. To some extent, they have to ask the question. It's certainly valid to ask about the fitness of a president or the fitness of a presidential candidate. That's fine. Let's remember some of the other presidents, a great president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, who had to hide the fact that he, from polio, was unable to stand. He was really the first, quote, disabled president because he used a wheelchair, but he had to hide that fact. And the press helped him hide that fact. Why did they have to do that? It's because of, again, the dark side of human nature that says, oh, if he wasn't able to stand, then he can't be a public servant. He can't be a president. He doesn't fit this kind of persona that people have. You notice before the debate, Trump's people and Trump were making all these suggestions that maybe Biden couldn't even physically stand, you know, for the entire time. It was completely nonsensical. But think about that for a second. FDR couldn't stand, and yet he saved this country. He brought it out of the Depression. He led it through most of World War II. And yet there's this notion that's a disgraceful thing if he had any kind of physical inability to stand up. He didn't need to stand up to lead the country. But it's an example of how people think about these things. So the media has a legitimate interest to ask these questions. I don't think it's a very legitimate interest that that's all they're talking about. Now everything else is like fallen off the headlines at this point. Let's talk a little bit about the Democratic Party and all the people questioning whether Biden should continue to run or not. You know, there are laws to guard against the dark side of human nature. There aren't laws to guard against stupidity. There aren't laws to guard against really making really bad choices or thinking really poorly. I'd like to suggest that this is very poor thinking at this point. Are these people talking about he should drop out for the good of the country, like, for example, the New York Times editorial board? Okay. Let's put that aside for a second. Should he drop out? What exactly are the Democrats thinking when they say that? Do they think that he's physically unable to perform his duties right now? It doesn't seem like they're saying that. They must be saying that, oh, we think he's going to lose to Donald Trump. What has changed since that debate? Which people who were going to support Biden are now going to support Trump because they think Biden sounded kind of weak and infirm? Does that make him a better president? I really don't think so. So what is the Democratic Party, or those who are calling for this, what are they really thinking here? There's obviously, as many other Democrats have said, there's obviously no real choice here whatsoever, right? I mean, people say, I'll take Biden on his worst day over Trump on his best day. And of course, that has nothing to do with, frankly, their physical fitness. It's because obviously Trump and his supporters are deeply anti-democratic. They very much want a dictatorship and a strongman type of government. And, you know, one of the problems with this dark side of human nature that I've referenced is that there is a persona that we think of, the strong man persona that people think of as the strong leader. And that can be deeply misleading. Trump loves that. He always talks about, so-and-so general looks like he came out of central casting. That's just image over substance. And it's important to understand that distinction, because what counts is the substance. And what counts is not the persona. And what becomes dangerous in the law is when you start making laws, as the U.S. Supreme Court just did with that immunity ruling, to support that persona, to support the strength of a leader who can't be questioned, the strength of a leader who can't be second-guessed, who can't be prosecuted if they commit crimes. So all these things kind of wrap together to me, and I'm sharing that with you because it's this dark side of human nature. It's the lack of self-analysis and the frenzy to get clicks, to get media hits, to jump into this sort of scandal type coverage instead of really looking at what the issues are for the country right now and really looking at why is there so much frenzy about this. So I'll leave you with that thought, and thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. And again, thank you so much for all the comments and replies. It really means a lot to me.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.